Do you ever wonder why some fat simply melts off, but it seems like you can never lose the fat in other areas? Some fat is just more stubborn. Today, we're going to take a look at what might be going on and the role that a little-known enzyme called HSL plays in the fat-burning process. If you want to slow or even reverse the aging process, if you want to turn back the clock on aging, then hit the subscribe button below and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment, let me know what you think of this channel, or suggest topics that you'd like me to do a video on. Hit the like button and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new video. Okay, so a lot of us are trying to lose weight, to burn off that excess fat. Now, I'm sure you've heard that old saw, exercise more and eat less. Or perhaps this one, it's all about calories. You have to burn more calories than you consume. But like everything else, there's a science behind burning fat. And understanding a little of that science can give you a leg up on losing some of that fat, especially that stubborn, hard to lose fat. Okay, so there's three types of fat in the human body. First, there's intermuscular fat. This is the fat that's stored within the muscles. Then there's visceral fat. This is the fat that's stored around the internal organs, and this type of fat is the most dangerous. Visceral fat drives up the risk of diabetes, heart disease, and stroke, even dementia. Then there's subcutaneous fat. This is the fat that's stored just beneath the skin and can be sometimes the most difficult to shed. So let's talk for a minute about the fat burning process. Fat burning is about three things. It's about calories, it's about hormones, and it's about blood flow. So let's tackle calories first, because it's the simplest. If you want to burn fat, you need to be burning more calories than you're consuming. It's just that simple. But that's not the only factor that impacts fat burning. There's also hormones. There are hormones that stimulate the storage of fat, like insulin and estrogen. And there are hormones that trigger the release of fat into the bloodstream, like testosterone and catecholamines, such as adrenaline and noradrenaline, also known as epinephrine and norepinephrine. And different types of fat react differently to the influence of hormones. And finally, there's blood flow. The more blood flow, the easier it is to burn fat. If we look at the fat burning process, in the first step, fat needs to be released from fat cells. This process of fat breakdown and release is called lipid hydrolysis, or lipolysis for short. Once the fat's released, it needs to be carried through the bloodstream to the cell that's going to burn it. Then the fat needs to enter that cell and unleash the energy it holds in a process called lipid oxidation. Now this is where the fat is burned. But just because the fat is broken down and released into the bloodstream doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get burned. It could wind up being restored in a fat cell, which tends to happen when people are highly insulin resistant. Now, this process of fat either entering a cell or leaving it is a result of the action of two enzymes, LPL and HSL. Lipoprotein lipase, or LPL, prompts the storage of fat, and hormone-sensitive lipase, or HSL, triggers the release of fat. And HSL levels are inversely proportional to insulin levels. The higher the insulin level, the lower the HSL level, and vice versa. Signaling by a compound called cyclic AMP impacts the breakdown and release of fat by hormone-sensitive lipase. Now, as its name implies, this process is impacted by the activity of hormone receptors in the fat tissue. These receptors are called adrenergic receptors, and there are two types. There are alpha receptors, which slow down the release of fats, and there are beta receptors, which accelerate the release of fat from fat cells. These adrenergic receptors, or ARs, can also impact blood flow. Alpha receptors restrict blood flow, while beta receptors allow for increased blood flow. Now, like I said, alpha and beta receptors are both hormone receptors in fat tissue. Hormones that store fat tend to increase the activity of alpha receptors and LPL, while hormones that release fat activate beta receptors and HSL. For example, insulin is a fat-storing hormone because it activates LPL while suppressing HSL and impairing the normal functioning of beta receptors. On the other hand, catecholamines can be fat-releasing hormones when they bind to beta receptors and they activate the HSL. But when they bind to alpha receptors, they can actually slow the release of fats. And this is where stubborn fat comes in. So what is stubborn fat? It's simply fat tissue that releases fat from fat cells more slowly than normal fat tissue. And the most stubborn of all fats is subcutaneous fat, that fat that's stored just beneath the skin. But not all subcutaneous fat is stubborn fat. First off, stubborn fat is different in women than it is in men. Female stubborn fat is more stubborn than male stubborn fat. Female subcutaneous fat has about 9 to 10 times more alpha receptors than male subcutaneous fat, and is located in different parts of the body. Female stubborn fat tends to be stored on the thighs, the hips, and the butt, while male stubborn fat tends to reside in the lower abdomen. But all stubborn fat has a few things in common. Stubborn fat has far more alpha receptors and fewer beta receptors. It's more reactive to insulin. It has a lot less blood flow. And subcutaneous fat in general is far more stubborn than visceral fat. Now, I suspect that most of you are not nearly as interested in the science of fat burning as you are in how the hell do I get rid of it? Well, that's what we're going to cover in next week's video. Be sure to tune in next week when I'll give you several strategies for tackling stubborn fat. If you enjoyed this video and would like more, then seriously, think about hitting that subscribe button and subscribing to this channel. Hit the like button, leave me a comment, and let me know what you thought about this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next week.